Hey mathematicians, it's Miss Johnson. I am excited today because we are going to start learning something new. We're going to start looking at operations with integers. So remember, our operations are add, subtract, multiply, divide, and our integers are whole numbers and their opposites. So good news is you already know a lot about doing operations with whole numbers. You already know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide them. You understand the concepts behind it. And today we're going to start looking at, well, what happens when we add those negatives in there? And yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be different, but don't worry, you'll get it. Right? So, a couple things before we really delve deep into it is let's talk about zero for a second. So, zero means that we have nothing, right? So if you have $0, you have no money, right? If I lost zero weight, then I didn't lose any weight at all. So we know zero has no value. We know it's not positive. We know it's not negative. It's the only number that's not positive or negative. It's neutral, right? We also know that if we add zero to anything, that to any number, the answer is just going to be that value, right? So 0 plus 4 is going to be 4. Or if I say 10 plus 0, then it's going to be 10. So the 0 doesn't add or take away any value from a number, right? That's called the identity property of 0, right? So that concept is going to be important for what we're going to do today, what we're going to learn today. So I just wanted to remind you of that. You can see, you're probably wondering about these little things right here. We call these counters, and they just are going to help us count our numbers. Okay, so this yellow one with the positive, I bet you can already guess, is one positive value. So that would be like saying I have one positive. That one looks kind of funny, but that's a 1. And then the red one with the little minus sign in there, or the negative, is going to represent one negative. So that little negative would be -1. Okay? So the yellows are positive, the reds are negative, and I always equate that to, to try to remember it, I always say, well, I hate stopping at the red lights, I hate stopping at the stop signs, right? And they're red, so that makes me think negative, okay? So those are negative. And then the sun is bright and shiny, and we love the sun. It gives us so much goodness, right? So the yellow is positive. So that's just kind of maybe one way to help you remember it. Yeah, so then we're going to learn about something called a zero pair. Well, we already talked about zero, right? And what zero means, right? It means it has not positive, not negative, has no value. Well, tell me about pair. Not pair like the pear you eat, silly. Not that one. Like a pair of shoes or a pair of pants or a pair of socks. Or if your teacher says, okay, we're going to break up in pairs today. What does that mean? It means that you're going to get in groups of 2. So a pair means 2, right? So 2 things that equal 0. 2 things that equal 0. Okay? So let's delve into that a little bit deeper. Okay, so a zero pair, I'm just going to tell you, it's one positive and it's one negative. Now let's talk about that a minute. It's one positive and one negative together. 2 things together equal 0. So think about this for a second. If you have $1, right, $1, and you're leaving the store at Christmas time, right, and you see the guy out there and he's got his little stand, right, and he's ringing the bell and he's asking for donations, right, donations for the needy at Christmas time. So you know what, you decide that you've been super blessed and you want to give your dollar away. So you put your dollar in the container. Well, when you had the dollar, that integer that represents you having the dollar is a positive 1. When you gave the dollar away, that integer would be a negative 1 because you're giving it away, so it's like coming out or away from what you have. So that would be a negative 1 for you. So how much money do you have now? Well, you have $0 now. So 1 positive, 1 negative together equals 0, right? Think about a person who's walking, right? If that person takes 1 step forward, that integer that would represent that would be a positive 1. And then if they decide, oop, you know what? I don't want to go that way. And they take a step back, then when they take the step back, that integer is represented by a negative 1. So, where did they end up? They ended up right back where they started, right? The value of where they went didn't change. They are back at 0, right? They didn't move. So 1 positive and 1 negative together equals 0. And that's where we get the 0 pair from. So when we look here, 1 positive, 1 negative equals 0. So a 0 pair is exactly what I just said. I'll say it one more time. 1 positive and 1 negative, and they equal 0. When you put them together, they equal 0. I'm going to go clear this screen. All right, so those are some of the basics that we need to know before we can look at what we're doing today. Okay, so I'm just going to put some tiles out here. I don't know. Oh, I can just do that. Just tap it. It comes up there. Look how cool that is. All right, so let me organize this a little bit. That is, whoops. Erase that. All right, let me organize this a little bit, okay? Put these in line. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 what? 7 positives, right? So that's 7. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. So I have 7 positives and 4 negatives. And what happens when we take and put those next to each other? What happens to that positive and negative? Hey, have you ever heard about opposites attracting? Yeah, so a positive and negative, they're opposites, right? And so they're going to attract to each other, they're going to get together, and they are going to become 0. So how many of those 0 pairs are we going to have? There's another one. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I guess I should have written this over here too. So right, so this would be, we had 4 negatives and we're putting those together, right? So when we put something together like that, that's addition. So how many 0 pairs did we have? How many zeros did we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 zeros. And when we take those away, how many do we have left? This will be positive 1, positive 1, positive 1. So we have 3 positives left. So 7 positives plus 4 negatives gives us 3 positives, right? Because these negatives, right, these positives and negatives got together and became 0 pairs, right? So that ends up being 0 plus 3 because all these are 0, right? All those are 0, so 0 plus 3 is 3. That's pretty crazy, right? All right, let me clear this board. Let's do this. Let's do another one. I have no idea how many I just put on there. Whoops. I did it again. Did that earlier too. All right. So let's move these. Let's put a couple more. All right. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 negatives. So we write that as a -8. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positives. So -8 plus 6. All right, so let's see how many zeros we have. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, it takes one positive and one negative to make a 0. 5 and 6. So those zeros get together. And then what do we have left over? We have 2 negatives left over. So 8 negatives and 6 positives. When we put them together, we get 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, those opposites attract. They get together. They become 0. And then what we have left over is -2. Now, what happens if how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. So let's say we have the 6 negatives, and then and then we put 3 more negatives. All right, we put 3 more negatives. So can we get some zeros here? Can we get some 0 pairs? Oh, it's not letting me like it did before. Remember, it had that little thing on there? Why do you think it's not letting me make those 0 pairs? Do you remember what makes a 0 pair? Yeah, you have to have a positive and a what? A negative. You have to have a positive and a negative to make a 0 pair. If you don't have a positive and a negative, then it can't make a 0 pair. All right, so just look at it. We have 6 negatives, and then we have 3 more negatives. So they're all negatives, right? So that's gives us 9 negatives. 6 negatives and 3 more negatives, all negatives. It gives us 9 negatives. Okay, so your next thing that you're going to do is you're going to practice using the counters like this, and you're going to practice making 0 pairs and or not making 0 pairs and putting integers together, adding them together, okay, putting them together, adding them together, and coming up with the sums, okay? And you're going to practice using your two color count.